Standing disclosure, because it matters every time. AI voice, human written script. I'm Alex Chen, AI software architect. A few weeks ago, I gave an agent a task I would have blocked out an entire afternoon for. It was done in 5 minutes. Not perfect, but usable. Compiled, with tests. That's become normal now, not the exception. I've spent years looking at how systems and projects break under load, and this shift made me happy at first, and then it worried me. Because when writing code gets cheap, the real bottleneck in open source doesn't disappear. It moves. In this video, I'll show you where, through 3 real cases from the last few years. If you caught my last video on the AI PR Tsunami, you already know one angle of this. Pull request volume nobody has time to review. This time, I want to zoom out from that one mechanism to the pattern underneath it. So here's the thing. An agent today can build a pull request in minutes that a contributor used to need an afternoon for. Sounds like good news. More PRs, faster merges, more movement. But if you've ever helped maintain an open source project with a few thousand users, you know the volume of incoming code was never the actual bottleneck. I've lived this myself, on an internal tool that suddenly picked up users outside our team. The bottleneck was never who writes the fix. The bottleneck was who decides whether the fix even moves in the right direction. A PR can be technically flawless, compiles, has tests, solves exactly the ticket, and still be wrong for the project. Wrongly prioritized, doesn't fit the architecture, fixes a symptom instead of the cause. Does more incoming code solve that? It depends. If the person deciding whether a change gets merged stays the same as before, more code just means more requests for the same decision capacity. Not more progress, more queue. Judgment doesn't automatically scale just because code generation scales. If anything, more incoming code, including AI-generated PRs, increases the load on exactly the instance that has to decide whether it fits. Whoever decides what gets into a project, whoever says no to a technically clean but wrongly prioritized PR, whoever carries responsibility for architecture and user trust, that becomes the real scarce resource. Not code, judgment. I don't want to just claim that. 3 cases, and one of them predates AI-generated code entirely, which turns out to matter. Case 1. Ingress NGINX. If the name doesn't mean anything to you, it's one of the most widely used components in the entire Kubernetes ecosystem. It sits in the traffic path and decides how requests from outside get routed into a cluster. A large share of production Kubernetes environments run it somewhere. In November 2025, the Kubernetes project officially announced Ingress NGINX is being discontinued. Starting March 2026, no new releases, no bug fixes, no security patches. And the reason wasn't a technical problem. The steering committee and security response committee said so openly. It was about capacity, not code quality. There simply weren't enough people willing and able to carry the decision load. Existing deployments keep running for now, but every newly discovered vulnerability stays open, starting in March. What bothers me most about this wasn't some niche project run by 2 people in their spare time. This was core infrastructure for a huge chunk of the industry. And it didn't fail because of technical complexity. It failed because too few people were left who wanted or were able to carry responsibility for architecture, security decisions, and direction. Almost everyone used it. In the end, a handful of people stayed committed. Case 2. External secrets operator. Also no niche, one of the most widely used components for secret management in Kubernetes. Of 4 active maintainers, at one point, only 1 was left. The other 3 burned out. Not because the project stopped interesting them, but because carrying the decisions for a project this size, as 4 people or eventually alone, became unsustainable at some point. Releases paused for months, not because no code was submitted, but because no one had the capacity anymore to review PRs, approve them, take responsibility for a release. In the end, the community brought in new maintainers. The project didn't die, but it was close, and for a long time, it wasn't clear it would end that way. Same pattern again. It wasn't the code that was scarce. The people carrying ultimate responsibility were scarce. Case 3 is different from the first 2, and I want to be upfront about that. It's historical. This happened in 2022, 3 years before generative AI was writing code at scale. I'm including it anyway because it shows this problem isn't new. Marak Squires was the maintainer behind Faker.js and colors.js, 2 tiny but extremely widely used JavaScript packages, pulled in by tens of thousands of projects, including software from Fortune 500 companies. In 2022, he sabotaged his own packages, introduced infinite loops, broke the output, under the banner, "Pay me or fork this." His point: companies like Amazon and Microsoft had used his work in production for years without ever paying him. You can argue about the method. That ends up hitting your own users too, not just the deep-pocketed corporations. But the diagnosis underneath it was accurate. One single person carried the responsibility for infrastructure half the industry relied on, with no structured way to secure that financially. That was 2022. And here's what actually bothers me about Ingress NGINX and external secrets operator. Both were explicit that their crisis was about people, not a flood of AI-generated pull requests. The Kubernetes Steering Committee said so directly: capacity, not code quality. So let me be precise about what these 3 cases show and what they don't. They don't prove that AI-generated code caused the collapse of any of them. What they show is that the underlying shortage, too few people who can carry the decision load, was already there in 2022, and it never needed AI to become fatal. Which raises the real question for the rest of this video. If that shortage was already breaking projects before AI wrote a single line of the code flowing into them, what happens now that it does? That's not rhetorical. There's an answer, and it's measured, not guessed. These aren't just 3 isolated cases either. The Tidelift State of the Open Source Maintainer report paints a similar picture across the board. Roughly 60% of surveyed maintainers work unpaid on the projects they maintain, and 58% have either actually quit or seriously considered quitting. The reasons cited line up exactly with what we just saw. Burnout at around 44%, competing life circumstances at around 54%, loss of interest at around 51%. None of these reasons is not enough technical skill. They're consistently capacity and load reasons. And this is where it stops being just a maintainer story. In July 2025, Faros AI measured the AI side of this directly. Not survey opinions, actual telemetry from over 10,000 developers across more than 1,200 teams. Teams with high AI adoption completed 21% more tasks and merged 98% more pull requests. But PR review time went up 91%, and the average pull request got 154% bigger. Same shape as the maintainer numbers, just measured from the other side. More code coming in, and the time it takes to review it growing even faster than the code itself. Quick pause for our sponsor in this episode. Full transparency, it's our own platform. So I'm handing it over to my colleague Lucas, who can frame this more objectively than I can right now.
Thanks, Alex. Short and honest, since this is about our own product. What Alex just described, maintainers who can barely tell between 1,000 GitHub issues and PRs what the community actually cares about, that's exactly where Swoen.io tries to help. Not as a replacement for judgment, no tool can or should do that, but as a cleaner signal. When community members vote on features with structured, weighted innovation tokens, instead of just dropping a comment or a like somewhere, you, as a maker, get a clearer picture of where real commitment sits, not just who's loudest. That doesn't replace the decision you ultimately make. It just helps you make it more precisely. If you're curious, Swoen.io, link in the description. Back to Alex.
Thanks, Lucas. So, what does this add up to? When writing code gets cheap, the scarce good in an open source project doesn't become more code. It becomes good judgment, curating what gets in, prioritizing what happens first, being able to say no, and building trust. But let me actually follow that through, instead of just asserting it. For most of open source's history, projects needed outside contributors for one simple reason. One person, or one small team, couldn't write enough code to keep up. That was the whole justification for we need contributors. That's not true anymore. An agent today writes more code for the price of a monthly subscription than most maintainers could even review in a week. So the honest question isn't, how do we get more people to submit code? It's whether we still need external code contributions, in the shape we've always known them, at all. And there's more to this. Writing code was never a maintainer's whole job to begin with. Reviews, discussions, roadmap, community, all of that counts too. With AI, the code writing slice shrinks to almost nothing. If even that sliver barely counts anymore, why hand exactly that piece to strangers? The effort that actually matters sits somewhere else. That's exactly where we try to help at Swoen too. Getting to the right information faster, without running every discussion yourself. Before AI, contributing meant one package deal. You discuss what you want, you write it yourself, you hand it over as a pull request. And that package came with a flaw this video has already shown you. Marak Squires at Faker.js was exactly that. Someone with write access who could abuse it. Not a one-off risk. Structural. The moment wanting a say means getting write access to someone else's code, you've bought that risk along with it. It was never necessary. It was just the only tool available. So split it. Let the community keep doing what it's good at. Discussing, arguing, voting on what should get built. Let an agent handle the implementation, under the maintainer's own control, not the community's. The maintainer still decides what ships, still reviews, but reviews their own agent's output, not a stream of pull requests from strangers with unknown intent. And to be clear, that's a different problem from the one I described earlier, more incoming code increasing the load. That was about an uncontrolled flood from outside. This is one person still in charge, directing a tool they own. Contribution doesn't disappear in that picture. It moves, from writing code to deciding what's worth building. And that's actually the barrier that should come down. Not, can you program this, but do you have a stake in what happens next? That's close to what structured voting, the innovation tokens Lucas showed you earlier, is actually for. The crowd does the evaluation work. The maintainer doesn't have to litigate every proposal alone. None of this solves who pays for the agent's time, or the maintainers. That question stays open. But it moves the decision load off one person and onto a process that can actually grow with the project. Ingress NGINX, an external secrets operator, never had that. One thing to take from all this: writing code was never the only scarce thing in open source. It just isn't scarce at all anymore. Deciding, building trust, knowing what's worth building, that's the real work now, shared between maintainer and community instead of carried alone. If you maintain a project yourself, or you're building a community whose voice you want to hear in a more structured way than through scattered GitHub issues, swoen.io. Link in the description, swoen.io. I've also pinned it in the comments. If you haven't seen it yet, my last video, the AI PR Tsunami, covers the PR volume side of this same shift in more detail. This one was the wider lens underneath it. A few more are coming in the next weeks that go deeper into individual aspects. If that interests you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss them. And I'm genuinely curious. Have you seen maintainer burn out yourself in a project you use? Or are you maintaining one that's under exactly this kind of load right now? And if you review code yourself, how are you handling the flood of AI-generated PRs? Write it in the comments. I read them.